Well, g'day and welcome to the channel. In today's video, I want to give you a checklist of things to go through before you upgrade your gear. Nobody wants to experience buyer's remorse, and by following this list, hopefully you'll be in a more informed position to make that right choice. The decision to upgrade is ultimately yours. I can't tell you what to do. All I can do is offer you some advice based on the good and bad decisions I've made over the years, upgrading and buying lots and lots of gear. So let's start with the most important thing to understand first. Better gear doesn't automatically lead to better photos. It's the person behind the camera, it's the skills of the photographer that ultimately takes a photo. So why even bother upgrading? Well, new gear like the 200 to 800, the Canon R5, just make it a lot easier. The low light performance, the autofocus, it just increases your hit rate and enables you to capitalize on your vision. Having good gear helps, but it's the photographer that is the most important thing. The question I want you to ask yourself before you upgrade is, can I get better photos by improving my skills first? Have you reached the limit of your existing gear? Perhaps just getting lower, getting closer, thinking about your backgrounds and doing everything that I talk about in my masterclass will improve your photos without you having to spend a single cent. So if you do believe your gear is limiting you, we need to answer a very important question. And I get asked numerous times a week, Duade, what should I upgrade to? And I always respond with, well, what problem are you trying to solve? What issue are you currently having with your existing gear? Write it down so you have a better understanding of exactly the problem you're trying to solve. Will this new gear or upgrade solve the issue that you're having? And you also need to write down, what do I enjoy the most about wildlife photography? What type of photography interests me the most? Is it bird in flight? Is it wide habitat shots? Is it waders? Is it raptors? Is it sitting in a blind? Is it walking through the bush? Just write down what you enjoy the most, because this will impact the type of lens, the weight, etc. Have a clear understanding of exactly what you like to do out in the field. And once we know that, we can then list down which features are most important to me. Is it the autofocus? Is it the weight? Is it the megapixels? Is it low light performance? Write down which features are the most important to you. Knowing exactly what you want compared to the limitations of your existing gear will help you understand whether upgrading will actually make much of a difference at all. Will upgrading actually solve your issues and meet all your expectations? Because not meeting your expectations is what leads to buyer's remorse in the first place. I'll just quickly list the common problems that people have and then how we can fix those issues. The first one is the bird's just too small on the frame. Often people say, I need to crop, I can't get any closer to the subject, and that's fair enough. How do we overcome that problem? Well, we need more focal length, like an 800mm lens. That will definitely make the subject bigger. Perhaps a bigger megapixel camera, like the R5 with 45 megapixels, or maybe switching to a micro four thirds system like the OM1. It's a nice small package, will get the subject big. Due to the smaller sensor in the OM1, it tends to make that subject bigger. Another common thing people tell me is, Duade, my images aren't sharp. There's numerous reasons why your images aren't sharp. Probably one of the most common ones is actually motion blur. That is that you're moving or the subject is moving. If you're moving, IBIS in the body, so image stabilization in the body, and good image stabilization on the lens is going to assist you to remove a lot of that motion blur. Maybe using high shutter speeds will help as well. And sometimes some lenses are just sharper than others. This 300 f4 prime on the Olympus is one of the sharpest lenses I've ever used. So do your research, find out. There's a few tools online where you can compare sharpness of lenses. The next most common reason would be the autofocus is slow and inconsistent. And I understand that, I've been there. Autofocus is extremely important with wildlife. If you're currently using an older DSLR and you want thinking about eye tracking on a mirrorless, it will make a big difference, especially on the R5, the R6 II, the Z8, the A7 IV, etc. These modern mirrorless bodies have very good autofocus. However, a word of warning, it's not perfect. I think a lot of people are disappointed when they go from a DSLR to a mirrorless. They expect that this eye tracking will just instantly find the bird, track it everywhere. They've seen videos online. In reality, it doesn't work like that. A lot of the time it gets confused. It goes on branches, it goes on grass. We still have to guide it with spot autofocus. So just be realistic. The autofocus in these mirrorless bodies is much better, but it's not perfect. And the last one, and one I've been getting all the time recently, and it surprised me how often it's popping up, is people are complaining about the weight. So they buy, say, this 200 to 800 from Canon, and all of a sudden this is what, 2.6, 2.7 kilos, and holding it, it just gets problematic. Arms get tired, we get a lot of fatigue, we start shaking, and it just reduces our enjoyment out in the field. Weight is probably one of the massive things that people underestimate. Like, they buy these lenses and then they can't handle the weight. This OM1 300 f4 lens, I think it might be 1.7 kilos. It's less than 2. So this whole kit weighs a lot less than just this lens. So consider the weight. It's a big part of upgrading. Just make sure if you do upgrade to the heavy gear that you're prepared to handle that weight. So once you've identified your needs, the next thing is, how do we know what gear to upgrade to? And this is very difficult because there's so many different variables at play. There's so many different brands, lenses, cameras. It's overwhelming. The first and probably the major thing is, what's your budget? How much money are you prepared to spend? Because that will dictate which lenses and cameras that you can upgrade to. So I think the best sources of information are existing users. Those that have had the gear for a certain period of time better understand the pros and cons. So when watching reviews on YouTube, try to ascertain, has this reviewer just got the gear? Or do they own the gear? How long have they had it? That will enable you to better understand where they're coming from. Now that's not always possible with new gear. Clearly a reviewer can only have it for a short amount of time. I like reviews of people that use it out in the field. So Nikon just dropped the Z6 Mark III, and for me, I watched Jan and Steve Perry, and their videos are great because they went out into the field, they used the gear, they have a better idea of the strengths and weaknesses. Also jump into the comments and read the comments from other people that use the gear. There's forums, there's reviews on B&H, etc. Do lots of research and just try and figure out what they are saying. What I'm trying to figure out is, are all the claims and the features, etc., that the camera manufacturer is hyping, are they true? Do they make that much of a difference? The Canon R7, they've come out saying it shoots 30 frames per second. It's got pre-capture, it's got this, it's got that. But in reality, the pre-capture is almost unusable. The buffer is so small, you just can't use 30 frames per second for very long. So those features are somewhat, or they're just not very useful for somebody like me. So until you find that out, I don't want you buying a camera just going off the features alone. You need to figure out whether those features will actually help you out in the field and whether they're usable or not. Obviously, the best solution is to try the gear before you buy it. And if you're in a country like America or maybe the UK that has a great gear rental system, I think it's not a bad idea. And remember, Dorax has done that. He left a really good comment. He said, the equipment is only part of the puzzle. It's important, but firstly you need to reach the limitation of your current gear. He thought he had reached the limit of his gear. He wanted to upgrade to the Canon R7 or the R6 Mark II, and he had a tough decision. So he said, why not just rent them? So he's rented the R7 for a weekend. He said he took 3,000 images. He loved lots about it, but also had a few issues. Now he's going to rent the R6 Mark II, and then he can compare the two and then determine which one's the right one for him. So that's a great idea. Unfortunately, in countries like Australia and other places, we just don't have a gear rental system in place. So what are we going to do? Well, one option is to find other photographers. You'll be surprised how quickly other photographers will be happy for you to show the gear, let you feel it, maybe take some shots on your own memory card. That's exactly what happened to me when I started. I was very fortunate. Other photographers were like, Duade, here, try this. I remember a mate of mine, Derek, lent me the Canon 1D Mark IV, the very first professional camera I had ever used. I was so excited, went on a pelagic, took lots of photos, this albatross, and it enabled me to use this gear that I could only dream of, so I had a better understanding whether it was the right fit for me or not. And of course, the other option is to go into a camera store and just have a feel of it. Pick up the 200-800. Just, is this going to be okay for me to use? How does it feel? How's the ergonomics of the camera? Sometimes the camera place will let you take some photos in the store. It's definitely worth trying these things out before you upgrade, because you don't want to make the wrong decision. And the next big consideration is, do you buy new or do you buy secondhand? Again, it depends on your budget, but buying secondhand will save you a lot of money. With the R5 II imminent, the R5, the original R5, is going to drop in price. The market's going to be flooded, and you'll be able to pick up the R5 for a lot less than what people will pay new for it, probably almost half the price. So if you're prepared to wait, you can definitely get gear secondhand much cheaper. The question is, well, where do you get secondhand gear from? In most countries, there will be a reputable place that you can buy it that will have a limited warranty. It's often a little bit more expensive, but if you want a warranty, that's definitely something you could check out. Cheapest places would be, of course, Facebook Marketplace or eBay. If you want to find out what the going rate is for secondhand gear, there's a website, I'll put it in the description, called Watch Count. You can look up anything that's been sold on eBay for your country or where you are. So I just put in the R5, and currently that's going for between 2,000 to 2,200. And I suspect once the R5 II drops, it'll go down to say 1,500 to 1,800. So it's a good idea. Check that site, check the price on Facebook, make sure you're not paying too much for your secondhand gear. Unfortunately, I've bought a lens with fungus and I've bought a lens where the IS was broken. I bought the original R6, got it secondhand, and the seller did not tell me that the SD card slot was damaged. Only one SD slot was working. I contacted Canon and I think they quoted me $800 to $1,000 to fix it. So obviously I wasn't going to pay that. So now that camera has only got one card slot. And when it comes to sell it, it's much harder to sell because people want dual slots. So that was my bad. I should have checked that before I bought it. So just be aware, buying secondhand can save you money, but just do your due diligence before you do. Now, of course, plenty of people will choose to buy gear new, and that's what I've done and that's what I do, but we pay a massive penalty. We often pay an inflated high price. When I bought the R6 Mark II, which I'm filming on now, I pre-ordered that camera. I was excited to get it. I think I paid close to full retail for the R6 Mark II. I had it a week and then I got an email saying it's now on sale for $400 off. I was so annoyed. Basically, I paid $400 to have that camera a week early. If I'd waited, I would have saved $400. And that's often the case with a lot of gear. It doesn't take long before they start discounting it. So if you can wait, you'll save money. If you can't wait, well, we just have to pay that premium, don't we? Another thing that I've learned, I'm calling it the diminishing returns theory. That is that often your gains, that is the improvement you get by upgrading, will diminish over time. When we start out, we often get the cheapest lens, we have an older body, we start taking photos, and often those photos aren't very good. And we go through this process, what am I going to upgrade to? So when I started, I had the 70-200, I upgraded to the 400 5.6, and then I started with the 40D and went to the 7D. Those two upgrades were just incredible. The difference in my photos was night and day. I went from sort of soft images to sharp images, and I've taken so many images that many of you have seen that I'm very happy with. So I had a distinct change and an upgrade, and I couldn't have been happier. However, when I upgraded from the 7D to the 7D2 and from the 5D3 to the 5D4, both times I had serious buyer's remorse. Why? Because I didn't get a big increase in image quality. It was only a small refinement. There wasn't that much difference between the two models. And because I'd had such big gains prior, I just expected that. So I was disappointed. And I definitely understand that now, that there's major upgrades and there's minor upgrades. So you have to think, what sort of upgrade am I making? If you're going from an old DSLR to say a full frame mirrorless, the difference is going to be enormous. If you're going from a short lens to a longer lens, you'll notice the focal length straight away. But if you're only going through versions, if you're going R5, R5 II, R6, R6 II, when you're just doing those minor upgrades, just be realistic that really you're just getting a more refined camera. You're not going to see massive technological changes. It's just these little refinements. So you need to decide, is buying a new camera, the R5 II, worth it? For me, yes, upgrading to the R5 II is worth it because this is what I do. I use cameras, I review cameras, so it's going to enable me to create content. But if you own an R5, the R5 II is, you're paying a lot just for those extra features, and only you can answer that, but just be realistic about what you're going to get. So the next thing you really need to figure out is where in the product cycle is the camera or lens you're thinking about buying. If you're thinking about buying the R5 at the moment, don't do it, because the R5 II is about to be released in the next few months. There's no point paying for an R5 brand new when the new model is literally just around the corner. However, it gets a little bit more tricky when we're mid-cycle. So the Canon R7, that's 2 years old now. We don't know when the next model is going to come out, the R7 Mark II. And just the other night, I did a presentation and a lovely lady came up to me and said, Duade, I'm thinking of buying the R7 and the 100 to 500. Do you think I should do it? I said, well, what camera are you coming from? She said she's got an 80D currently, an older DSLR, and she's wanting to capture bird in flight. So she wants the eye tracking. And I said, well, are you aware that that R7 is 2 years old now? And she wasn't really. I said, the R7 II is likely to come out next year. Are you prepared to wait? She said, yeah, I can wait. But I just felt bad because the R7 will be a big improvement. But is it worth buying the R7 now, new, when the new model is likely to come out in the next 6 months to a year, and it will be a lot better? I think version 2 cameras are often better, or they are, than version 1 generally, because they've learnt from the first one, they've refined them. So if you can wait for that second generation, you'll often get a better camera. So I'd be curious, what would your advice be for this lady? Would you upgrade to the R7 now, or would you wait for the R7 Mark II? Again, it depends on your finances and what you're doing. But in reality, the choice to upgrade really depends on our personal circumstances, where we're going, what we're doing. Can we wait? Can't we wait? If you're going on a trip of a lifetime to Antarctica and the R5 II is just about to be released, buy it. If you've got the money, buy it. Don't wait, because you might not do that trip again, and the camera might enable you to get photos that you wouldn't have been able to prior. So I did that when I went to the sub-Antarctic. I was using the 7D Mark I think, or Mark II, and I wasn't happy with the noise performance. I knew I was going somewhere where the light would be bad, it would be raining all the time, and I really wanted a full frame camera. So that's when I bought the 5D Mark III. That had only recently come out. I bought that camera and it performed exceptionally well. It enabled me to capture images in really low light, and I couldn't have been happier. That was the right choice at the time. Even though it cost me quite a bit of money, I thought it was worth it, and it definitely paid dividends. The last thing I want you to consider is, instead of upgrading your gear, use the money on a trip or a holiday as opposed to new gear. Now, gear is important and it's brought me some joy, but if I'm being honest, the most joy that I get out of photography is going out on trips with mates. It's very, very difficult to beat. So I'm not sure if I've shared this story, but when I first started out, I caught the bug. I joined a forum. It had the best bird photographers in Australia. One photographer put up a post saying, I'm going on an inland trip, 1,200 kilometers for a week, and I'm looking for a travel companion. I'd never met this person before, and I thought I would love to do that. So I turned to my wife and I said, I've met a man online and I want to go on a trip into inland Australia. I'll be gone for a week. Are you okay with that? And to my surprise, she said, if that's what you want to do, go for it. And that's what I did. We traveled, I think, 2,400 kilometers there and back. We were photographing birds every day, and it was one of the best trips I've ever had. He's a good lifelong friend now. His name's Hindercock. I learnt so much from him. He takes amazing photos, and that was just one trip of many that I've taken and have memories. So if you haven't done a lot of bird photography trips, I highly encourage you to think about doing that before you upgrade, or maybe do both, but it's definitely worthwhile doing those trips. So I've got a lot of beautiful members, and Tomas shared with me that he prefers to go on trips as opposed to upgrading gear. He said he just recently went to Colombia, and he emailed me and shared with me all the beautiful images. Check them out, all these hummingbirds, and he's had a wonderful trip. He said his next trip's going to be Ecuador. So instead of upgrading, he's just going around the world photographing all these beautiful birds, and that sounds like a great way to spend your money to me. All right, so that brings us to the end of the video. If you want to avoid buyer's remorse, just do lots of research. Before you spend your money, make sure you're buying the exact gear that's going to assist you and help you with whatever problems that you're having. Can you work on yourself? Is it the gear? Are you going to buy new? Are you going to buy secondhand? Can you try the gear before you buy it? Doing all these things will hopefully help you to make better informed decisions. I'd love to hear in the comments below, what do you do before you buy or upgrade? What processes are you going through? We can learn off one another. We really do appreciate it, and I do read those comments. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care, happy birding, and we'll see you in the next one. See you later.